Hello and welcome to the C Team. I'm Mike Curley.
And this is Frank Curley.
And today we are talking about genre hopping.
Yeah.
Games about rabbits.
Yes. Well, actually, Super Mario Plus Rabbids came out, which is apparently an XCOM-based tactical shoot. I'm not making this up, by the way.
I'm going to have to check that because that sounds like a load.
Yahtzee Croshaw reviewed it, and I'll tell you something, the review is beautiful.
Okay, that I have to look into this. But
yes.
What we're really talking about,
On that happy note,
genre hopping in the sense of games in one franchise or one genre that within the same franchise hop to a different genre, such as Dissidia, Sonic the Dark Brotherhood, Mario. Mario does this a lot, actually. Mario Kart, Mario RPG, all the sports, board games, and everything else.
And well, the theory that Super Mario, the whole cast, they're just actors, and that's why they're able to go karting together.
Yeah, that's Super Mario 3 is a stage show. It's an inside job.
Yep.
But anyway, so this is kind of inspired by a game we're going to talk about later, Fire Emblem Warriors. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, we're going to just talk kind of in general terms about the what can this bring to a franchise? They obviously do this for a reason. I mean, besides money grubbing, which is the reason for a lot of things in games.
Yep.
But in a more optimistic sense, I think it brings some things to the table.
Yeah.
For one thing, a lot of genres are kind of restricted in the sense that, like if you're playing a fighting game, you're not getting a lot of story. If you're playing a Resident Evil style adventure game, you only see the characters in Crisis, and vice versa. If you're playing an RPG, it's not as visceral. It's not as, you're not seeing what the characters can really do. You're seeing the stats. So you can kind of see aspects of the franchise that you wouldn't otherwise explore.
Like combos and stuff.
Well, what I mean is, Mario RPG gets you get to see the Mushroom Kingdom kind of at peace. You get to interact with the world and the characters and expand the world and the characters, when up to then it had just been Mario, Luigi, Toad, Peach, and Bowser, and that was like it. That was the world.
But it is a tricky line because one thing, there are themes in the game other than gameplay, and even themes that are tied to gameplay. So a big concern is, like for instance, a Warriors game based on a franchise. Like, does it really capture the spirit, or is it just switching skins for the most part? Like, is it like does it still like capture the spirit?
Well, yeah, I think that's you don't want it to just be a skin swap. You want it to still feel like you want it to be something other than just a Warriors game that has Link's face on it.
Right. Like Syndicate, which is like a top-down tactical game in PC back in the day. In the last few years, they made it like a third-person shooter, and it was basically met with disdain.
Yeah, you don't want to alienate the old guard who are fans of it. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, one aspect of a genre hop could be to bring new people to the franchise, to the setting. People who might not play a Zelda game because it is, a big daunting exploration thing. They might get introduced to the world because they like the Warriors games, or vice versa. Someone who maybe does not have time for a 60-hour RPG might jump into Final Fantasy with Dissidia. So it's kind of a way to expand the audience, expand the world, and I think it also in the sense of expanding the franchise itself. If it stagnates, it's not going to go anywhere. If every franchise entry is the same thing over and over again, people are going to back away eventually. So experimenting and jumping into or dipping into different genres can provide a way to kind of keep the franchise going into new directions.
Yeah, and keeping on that, introducing, Fire Emblem, was a tactical strategy RPG, but we were both introduced to it, as a Western audience as fighting game characters.
Marth debuted in Smash Brothers. Yes.
Yes. Well, the funny thing is, Roy actually did debut in that game.
Huh.
Yeah. He was like a promotional material, basically.
Oh, right. Yeah, because the new game was coming out.
Right.
Makes sense.
And their first appearance since the SNES era, actually, on the Game Boy Advance. Outside of the actual franchise, I was introduced, and that's what got me interested in it.
Yeah, so there's a successful case. Frank would not have known about the series unless it had. Well, it wasn't really. I wanted to kind of talk about Smash Brothers later because it's not really a genre hop for a franchise.
It's a crossover.
It's a big crossover thing. So let's get off Smash Brothers for a little bit. I kind of laid out what I see as the positive things in a genre hop. So what you mentioned some of the things you see, or concerns about it. It's the spirit of the franchise. Is a skin swap? Is it, what does it do to the franchise that could be negative?
Right. And, you have, fans of EverQuest, some of them, might not, particularly like Champions of Norath for its, simplified, combat.
It's basically a gauntlet game, really.
Yeah, gauntlet only with more things to do besides press attack and hope for the best. And yeah, it goes back to alienating, the franchise. Like that weird, Mario plus Rabbids thing I mentioned earlier. Who is that trying to appeal?
I don't know. I'm not sure they even know. It's kind of like they just shook a bunch of things in a Yahtzee cup, splayed them out, and whatever the dice landed on. Okay, Mario, Rabbids, XCOM. Yeah, we can make this work. We're Nintendo. We can do it. Which you gotta admire the the gung ho attitude of Nintendo. They will not throw away something as a bad idea. They just jump right into it.
Yeah. So, hopping off of that, Hyrule Warriors.
So, yeah, Hyrule Warriors. Nintendo is on a Warriors kick right now, apparently. They started with Hyrule Warriors, which, as I'm sure you know, is a Legend of Zelda-based Warriors game. Warriors being, as Frank, you summed it up succinctly earlier. What did you call it?
Yes, you pick a historical character and beat the crap out of dummies, essentially.
So in this case, it's you pick a Zelda character.
Yeah.
So
and just to introduce the Warriors a little bit, it started as like historical based and had some pretty cool variation interpretations of historical characters. So they've had a huge rise in popularity. What with Hyrule Warriors. Going sort of branching off.
Yeah, because it's Hyrule Warriors, and spoiler alert, is not a historically based game.
No. Sorry, Hyrule didn't actually nearly die 7 times.
I would rather have Hyrule than Camelot, honestly. Hyrule is just kind of cooler.
Yeah, I would much rather have Hyrule than Westeros.
I think everyone, you could name most settings and rather have that. I would rather have The Walking Dead than Westeros.
Rather have Mad Max.
Yeah, because
Westeros.
So anyway, it did some things with the Warriors formula. It kind of cleaned up some of the gameplay, made it.
Oh yeah.
What it brought in was some Zelda touches like the targeting and that kind of thing. To kind of clean up the gameplay, make it a little smoother and a little easier to manage.
Yeah, because in all fairness to Hyrule Warriors, I've played a lot of Warriors games, or mainly just Samurai Warriors. Mike was introduced through Hyrule Warriors, and I was kind of odd about the idea of Hyrule Warriors, but I was happy with the changes in gameplay they did because they need to clean some things up. They really did.
Like, what did they need to clean up?
Well, a lock-on for one. The dodge roll they had was just laughable. More variations in, the kind of fight you do rather than, punching a slightly smarter dummy.
Yeah, with the giant boss monsters. You don't see a lot of those in historical Japan or Romance of the Three Kingdoms era China, despite... the giant enemy crabs that one game infamously boasted in its historically accurate battles.
I love how straight-faced he was. Well, describe that.
That's something you have to do straight-faced. You can't crack up introducing your own game. That's bad feng shui.
Yeah, you have to go just balls out. Just we're going to do historical characters with giant enemy crabs with weak points and stuff.
Well, enemy crabs do have weak points. That is historically accurate. But I would presume the giant ones do too.
But usually, a regular sword would do.
I don't know. I've met some crabs, man.
Those mud crabs, disgusting creatures.
Oh, don't get me started. Anyway, so Frank and I have some not necessarily disagreements on Hyrule Warriors, but he's a little more critical of it than I am. So I will let him talk about the problems he has with it.
Okay, so I've played Zelda since basically the beginning.
Yeah, the original.
Yeah,
well, not when the original came out, because Frank was in fetus at that time.
Yeah. They put a little control. Anyway, I won't go into that.
Please don't.
So, we'll start with Zelda was always more exploration and puzzles than combat. I mean, the combat was there. Yeah, don't get me wrong.
The first thing Link picks up is a damn sword. So yeah.
But see, and Link himself. Some people interpret him as a knight, but going on D&D rules, I've always referred to him as a ranger. Someone who can sneak around, but that's not his only thing. Who you can use a bow and arrow, but that's not his only thing. Can hold his own in a melee fight, but again, not his only thing. And also exploring the way he dresses, the green, and how he travels. He always came across as a forest dweller, and I know Link is usually up to interpretation, but I always saw him as kind of like a trickster hero. Like you think about the bosses, one by one. It's like, oh, remember when he took out that spider with a slingshot? Yeah, that was cool. Or he stuffed a bomb down that dragon's throat, or stuff like that. And his sword is usually an afterthought in those boss fights. And so we get the Hyrule Wars, and I always found it kind of jarring because for one, there aren't many characters who do things.
What do you mean by do things?
Well, you get a glimpse of Darunia, challenging Volvagia, but I guess he's in the lava at that point when you finally reach the room, and then the bug lady from Twilight Princess is playable for some reason.
Yeah, she's kind of a weird joke character. But I understand what you're saying, but the reason you don't see them do anything is because in the regular Zelda games, you're just playing as Link. I mean, it's that Darunia there, every other Darunia says, if I had the hammer, I'd take care of it. And he has the hammer in Hyrule Warriors. So it's not that the characters are incapable of fighting. It's just that it's not their story when you're playing a Zelda game. So I don't see anything wrong with bringing them into a combat situation. And as far as Link being a ranger, again, that's just a function of the game. When it comes down to it, he's got the sword, he's got the shield, those are his primary weapons he throws down. And in the story, he has been either a knight or descended from the knights, and that has been a part of his thing since at least Link to the Past.
Well, title, yes, but I always felt ability, that's just not him. When we you look at Breath of the Wild, you have the Night Link from his past, but then when you see him basically forget everything and no longer has that pressure on his shoulders, you see what he truly is.
Well, that's a different Link. This is the Link in Hyrule Warriors is a knight. It is. There are similarities between the characters, but there's differences too. Each one is a unique character. So I don't see a problem with a version of Link that just is throwing down with armies, because it's something he can do. It's something with that he has been noted as a great warrior. He is a great warrior in the thing. So I think that's kind of I honestly think that just kind of focusing too much on just the nuances of the gameplay itself. I mean, Link, yes, in other versions of Link are explorers and archers and everything else. This version of Link he's a straight up warrior. That's what he is. It's a warrior's game.
Yeah, but imagine if one version of Spider-Man was like the Thing. For some reason, that's
more of a radical change. I mean, you're changing the characters Yeah, the whole capability. It's not It's more about what if Spider-Man still had all those powers but was in a different setting. That's really more of what it is.
Well, what if he hardly used the web slinging and just punched people?
Yeah, well, you're talking now about Spider-Man Noir, who did not have web slingers. He had a revolver, actually. Spider-Man Noir does not mess around.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But how many universes are there? Oh yeah, too many. But it just kind of it just doesn't feel like Zelda. And going back to the bug lady, well, all the Warriors games have had this problem where you have all these generals who, okay, I can see him beating the crap out of somebody. Why is the dancer lady with no history of combat, killing as many people as the actual soldiers? Is that incongruent?
Because in ancient Japan, everyone was a badass. Everyone. No exceptions. Even the wimps were badass.
But you get my point.
I do, yes. And some characters are in there almost as a joke. I think it's not something to get bogged down on. I think that's getting caught up in the details. It's still a good game. You played through the whole thing with me.
Yeah, I mean, it is fun. It's just, as a Zelda game, I just don't feel it really captures anything.
Well, that's... it just... A large part of that is actually in the backstory of the game development. Quay was originally... Their original concept was to make it more of a Zelda game, with elements like dungeons and puzzles. And then it was Nintendo that said, no, we want this to be a Warriors game. Let us make the Zelda game. You make a Warriors game with Zelda elements, and I think it's better for that, because I think if Quay tried to make Nintendo, as we know from Breath of the Wild, is the best at making Zelda games.
Yes,
I think if Quay had tried to make a Zelda game, it would have been disappointing as a Zelda game. Instead, what they made was a Warriors game that you yourself said is made better by the inclusion of elements from Zelda, like the lock-on, the items, and all that stuff.
Well, Zelda, well, at least, for Mike and I, that's the first one that really introduced, lock-on, and, but they also introduced a lot of other, like, melee, conventions that just made it a whole lot better, lock-on, blocking, dodging, and all of that. And, I wouldn't say that was that's really an exclusively Zelda thing anymore.
But they did it first, and they kind of did it the best.
Right. Well, I mean, Dark Souls basically, took, Ocarina of Time system and cranked up the difficulty.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it coming kind of full circle to that, Breath of the Wild is almost to that level of difficulty, especially in the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Those damn Guardians.
So I think, it's not really a Zelda game. It has a Zelda story. But personally, I kind of like seeing the other characters. And this is kind of what I was going into before about, other aspects of the franchise. I love that you can play as Zelda and she's not just sitting there waiting to be rescued.
I do agree that Zelda should be doing a bit more than she does.
Yeah. So I like that Darunia, I love Darunia because he curls into a ball and bowling balls his way around the battlefield. So I like the aspect of bringing in characters who wouldn't normally do much. Because, Zelda, her name is on the damn franchise, and I love that she gets a sword and she gets to kick Ganon around and take everything back, and you see more of the characters. So I like, that's an aspect I like about it. It's not just Link. The army actually gets off its ass and helps.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing about Zelda. I think the original Japanese title of Legend of Zelda was Hyrule Fantasy.
Yeah.
The Legend of Zelda. So I have a feeling what they originally intended was there was going to be, a lot of other tales around Hyrule, but not necessarily centered on Zelda, all the time. Mm-hmm. But the Zelda name just kind of stuck. So yeah, it was more just like how a Conan story is just like the jewels of such and such. It's just a
story in that setting.
Yeah, a story in the setting, and the title is just a small thing. What the subject matter is, rather than the protagonist.
Yeah, so not that people don't make that mistake. A lot of people still think the guy in green is named Zelda.
Yeah. What was that, Space Marine called Metroid that rolls up into a ball?
Well, Metroid, it's a cool guy, kills monsters and doesn't afraid of anything.
Yes.
Anyway, moving on. So that's our basic disagreement on Hyrule Warriors. I like some of the things that Frank doesn't like about the game, and I tend to be more forgiving in general. But I like that it expands on the setting.
Yeah, like I never said it was a bad game. It was always just kind of jarring to me. It was just like that's an odd choice.
I mean, it makes sense to me. It makes sense as a game, and honestly, I like playing as Ganondorf too. He's just like he's slow, but he's just an engine of destruction, and it's fantastic. He's just like wiping guys out, and you don't get to see. That's another character you don't get to see him do a lot in the games because usually by the time Link gets into it, whatever Ganondorf was up to, he's done or he's in the closing stages of it. And the one fight you see him in is against Link, which he's going to lose. So it's interesting to see him really take the field and take the forefront for a little while. Yeah. It's also kind of hilarious that the game basically boils down to someone has a crush on Link. Ganondorf, just for shits and giggles, goes, you should do something about that. And, like, it works out so much better than he possibly could have hoped.
It's like, I'm done planning, you do something.
Yeah, he kind of just sits back, lets her do it. And I apologize, I'm stealing a punchline from Manly Guys Doing Manly Things. Great webcomic, by the way. Anyway, so that's, I could talk a lot about Hyrule Warriors because I love the game, and I still throw it in a couple every once in a while when I need some catharsis. Because it's great for that, especially as Link. Because Link gets the most overpowered weapon in the game, like, really early. Well, and from then on, he's just slaughtering things left and right.
Well, at one point, was genre hopping, especially for Zelda, I kind of feel, Warriors game usually has several characters. Like, you might have a poster boy, but there's no real, like, protagonist, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone can die, so you need a few backups, I guess.
Yeah. And, I mean, even the poster boy, at the end, might die in his own ending. Mm. And the thing is, kind of even with all these, playable characters, the focus is still going to be basically on Link and Zelda. Like, it feels a little unbalanced in that regard.
Well, they kind of break it up. I think that's why, like, midway through the game, they split you into the 3 timelines, so you have to play as other characters for a while. And the other characters, they have interesting gameplay and gimmicks. Yeah. You can play as Link or Zelda through most of them, but I had a lot of fun with Sheik. I had a lot of fun with Darunia. Even Fi. Fi can be fun to play with. And, you can mix it up some. It's interesting to play with the other characters.
Yeah, but it still kind of feels like he's still the one with the Master Sword. He's still the one with the ultimate weapon. It all comes down to him. When I kind of feel when you have like so many playable characters, there really shouldn't be one guy to end it all.
Well, you kind of it's a story. That's more of a storytelling thing where ensemble casts are hard, and even in an ensemble cast, there's going to be somebody who is the most central character. Like Final Fantasy VI has 14 cast members, and it's well known as an ensemble, but the main story still kind of revolves around Terra. She's one of the characters who, has the most impact on the story and on whom the story impacts the most. You can finish the game without her, but it is in a lot of ways her story. She's the one connected to the Espers. She's the one that you start the game as. So she is, as much a protagonist as anybody else, but at the same time so that's kind of like a storytelling thing. I think in Warriors it's more like each character has a storyline to play through.
Yeah.
Whereas Hyrule Warriors is just like, here's one storyline.
Well, Samurai Warriors, they did the individual stories, but a lot of the Warriors games kind of have like, a timeline, a general historical timeline that, you pick a character and go with. But, one thing I'll cite Fire Emblem for doing well, specifically Sacred Stones, you don't have to finish the main villain with either protagonist, with their, ancient weapon, because there are actually several ancient weapons, one of each type. So you can have, one of the regular units finish them off, like what I had happen. You have all these characters, but the focus isn't exclusively on these two.
Okay, yeah, because Fire Emblem, like you said, it has more of an ensemble cast to start with in the franchise. Link, Zelda is, it's about Link. Well, it's about Zelda, but Link is, for the last 30 years, every game you played as Link. We're not talking about the CDI games.
God.
And
or the
so,
cartoon.
so necessarily, that a Zelda game, Link is going to be at the forefront because he is the protagonist of the series, the playable protagonist. That said, I would love to see a game starring Zelda. Anyway,
so jumping right off, I've been playing Fire Emblem Warriors this week. It just came out, and it has a lot of the refinements that Hyrule Warriors has, and overall, this just kind of makes a lot more sense to me. I mean, there are some odd things, and I think this is more of a Koei thing than a franchise thing. Going back to the Bug Lady, they gave the main healer an axe, as opposed to like a magical attack.
Well, her magic is on healing. I mean, she specializes in healing, so she needs something else to hit people with.
Yeah, like attack magic,
no,
which Robin uses.
I'm thinking Final Fantasy rules where if you're good at with you're either a white mage or a black mage, and the black mages have like axes and hammers and stuff there, so it makes sense to me.
Well,
it's an axe of healing.
Well, she's like winning the axe, and she's like a very tiny person, and I know this is like a common anime thing, but I've never really cared for it. I kind of feel like the animation stuff should like match the character, and. Another great point. When you have a game like this, it's in a way fan service because you're trying to bring fans of the series into this, and they pick some odd choices for characters. One, they focus on Fates, which the cast of Fates, personally, I think they're the worst, and is also the best way of starting an argument among fans. And they left out a lot of favorites, like Hector and Ike. And
maybe they'll be DLC.
Well, I heard like they're not touching it unless they get a sequel for some reason. Which I think is a huge waste because I will gladly play as anyone else from any other game than Fates. Like Fates is poorly written, badly characterized.
Maybe that's it. They wanted to give Fates another shot.
Watching the cutscenes, no.
But anyway, moving on.
But so and as a fan, it's just kind of it feels like a lot of like retreaded subplots that were big deals in like the main games, but now they're just kind of jokes here. It's just kind of like I don't know. They kind of rub me the wrong way.
But that said, and on a concept level, I feel like Fire Emblem Warriors.
Oh yeah,
it's almost like a lateral move because the main series is already about these big army versus army battles. Yeah. So from turn-based strategy to warrior style, it's really taking the same subject matter and zooming in on it.
Yeah, obviously war is a big subject of discussion in a Warriors game, and and as is for Fire Emblem, and this just makes a lot more sense. Like I compared to Link again, I see like Hector or Chrom like in the middle of battle, but I don't see Link there. So this always made a lot more sense to me. Yeah, I remember thinking when Hyrule Warriors was being advertised, I was like, this make a lot more sense with Fire Emblem, and then here you are. And I am enjoying it. It's still a fun game. It is, less jarring. I've kind of ditched the two main characters they introduced there for others. Just I've been playing as Chrom and Lucina and all that fun bunch. But yeah, overall, I think this is just a more sensible move.
I could see that. Yeah, there is the tactical aspect of the larger scale war, which is more at home with Fire Emblem than it is with Zelda.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of Avengers because each character was basically a protagonist in their own story.
And then you bring them together. Is it telling the same story as Fates?
Sort of. Like a much thankfully abbreviated version of the stories of Fates. They have like subplots from Awakening, like one of the characters getting possessed, but one objective, it literally says, knock some sense back into him. So it's, I mean, I understand the lighter tone and everything, but...
Yeah, because the Warriors games, you know, they are about war and Romance of the Three Kingdoms and all that, but, you know, it's kind of silly when you're wading into, like, thousands of guys and, you know, and they have, like, cheat codes to turn everybody into tigers or something.
that was
they are kind of silly games, especially because they're all playing basically the same subject matter over and over through all of them.
Yeah. Actually, that kind of makes Warriors Orochi a bit of a refresher, because it's basically a big, like, Asian Ragnarok, and they actually have to come up with a different plot each time. So yeah, that felt kind of a refreshment. So, some stakes that I didn't go through the first time.
Something new to go on instead of the same battles with differently organized maps and different sets of allies, or however they want to mix it up for Fire Emblem or for what was the original one? Dynasty Warriors 6 as opposed to Dynasty Warriors 3.
Yeah. And
I think they did get up to like 7 or 8, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, it is actually less jarring when they're actually going after, like, subhuman, like, creatures rather than, like, people.
Yeah.
Battling an invasion. Yeah,
you feel a little less guilty slaughtering a bunch of aliens and demons than just random Chinese conscripts.
Yeah.
Those are the same guys who were singing Be a Man in Mulan, and there you are slaughtering them wholesale.
Link, I'll make a man out of you.
What? Yeah. Okay, so moving on.
Yeah. So yeah. We kind of forgot to ask the audience, but, you know, there are, you know, some games I kind of want, or actually other adaptations. That's right.
Yeah, we're going to talk. This isn't strictly like genre hopping, but, you know, franchises get adapted into video games. Everything does at some point. Yeah. And it's interesting to note that some franchises, a lot of them, they don't stick to one genre. Like Lord of the Rings, you know, the first few games were kind of beat 'em up games in the vein of almost like Golden Axe, where, you know, you played as Legolas, Gimli, or Aragorn, and then the later game expanded that to Gandalf and a couple of the hobbits, and I think Faramir was a hidden character there.
Yeah.
But it started with that. There's also a couple of RTS games, like a War of the Ring and the Battle for Middle-earth. The Lord of the Rings always has been interesting because different game companies had rights to make adaptations of the book versus adaptations of the movie.
Yeah.
So you had the Battle for Middle-earth, which I believe was the movie one, and War of the Ring, which was the book one and had Tom Bombadil as a summonable character.
Nice.
And they also had The Third Age, which was a regular turn-based RPG, actually almost used the same system, or same turn system, kind of, as Final Fantasy X. And now there's also like more Western RPGs or like adventure combat games in the vein of Dark Souls in stuff like Shadow of Mordor. So it's interesting that a franchise like that, you see different aspects of it through the different genres. The beat-em-ups were straight adaptations of the movies. The RTS bits, they were kind of a larger pulled back, you know, not dealing with Frodo in the ring so much, but dealing with, you know, Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith. The things that in the books and to an extent in the movies, they were the big, they were kind of a really big sideshow to what the real conflict was. And it was kind of interesting where I believe in War of the Ring, you could actually, if you played things right, you could have characters survive things that killed them in the movies. Yeah. Like you could bring Boromir, you can show up with Gandalf at the Battle of Minas Tirith to bail them out, which is a little weird, but anyway.
So and then we have superheroes.
Yeah,
which like all of them.
Yeah, like, and they probably get into as many. You know, a lot of them started as side-scrolling beat-em-ups because back in the day, that's what every game was. That wasn't like a dedicated RPG or something.
Well, I think that works for like a group of heroes. Like,
yeah,
like a fighting game doesn't really work for every single superhero. Like, why would Superman be in a fighting game?
Yeah, well, the Injustice games, they kind of work out that way. And I think a fighting game, a fighting game is always tricky because the superheroes they operate on such weird power levels. Like, I love Batman, but he should not be able to win up a straight fight with Superman. And yes, that's why Injustice introduces a kryptonite or a Kryptonian power pill. No, it's a thing in the fiction.
I know.
Where at one point Alfred eats one of these pills and kicks the crap out of Superman. It's another reason I love Alfred. Anyway, but yeah, the team-based beat 'em up games, especially the Avengers game, the old arcade game, most of the X-Men games.
Welcome to Die.
Yeah, that's a classic. The Spider-Man games, a lot of them basically boil down to what superheroes kind of just do in the comics a lot is walk around and punch people. So that's a kind of a natural fit. And I think they in more recent times, everything has to have RPG mechanics. Yeah. You have to build up levels. So naturally the kind of top-down Diablo clone like X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance and all of those were kind of more, there's mostly a natural extension of the side-scrolling beat-em-up.
Yeah, and I will say it's definitely more combo and action game based than Diablo is. Because Diablo essentially click on that thing and wait for it to die, or click something else and wait for it to die. And it definitely feels more like a beat 'em up. Yes, there are RPG mechanics, but it's not RPG.
Yeah, the RPG mechanics, you get stronger, you get new special attacks, but for the most part, you're punching, you're kicking, and you're throwing, and you're picking up things. The main difference is in Final Fight, you're picking up a garbage can or a pipe. X-Men Legends, maybe you're picking up a car or a telephone pole. Justice League Heroes, same kind of thing. Although I liked in Justice League Heroes that even within the gameplay, they did still kind of scale things where Superman was just hitting harder than Batman. So Batman had to do other things and use gadgets, and they kind of separated the characters a bit by tier within the gameplay. So that game kind of does a good job of separating things, and where was I going with this?
I'm not sure, but
yeah, I'm just saying the superheroes, especially in a franchise like DC DC or Marvel, where you have such a difference between, Daredevil should not be fighting the same things as Iron Man.
Yeah,
they're just on different power levels, so that's kind of a difficulty you have to reconcile within a game, so that everybody doesn't just pick Iron Man.
Yeah, and without Kryptonite, what kind of game do you think would be good for Superman?
Well, actually, I'm not sure how good it was as a game, but one interesting thing that Superman Returns did as a game, Superman was invincible. The health bar was for the state of the city. So the challenge there wasn't, avoiding hits as Superman. It was, saving the city. And I think that's an interesting way to go about a Superman game. I mean, for the most part, Superman as a straight combat character is kind of boring. Yeah. He's invincible, he's super strong, he's super fast. When it comes to throwdown, there's a handful of people in the DC universe that can really go toe with him. So I think it's the same problem as writing Superman in the fiction. He's at his best when he's facing something he can't just punch.
Yeah.
Because he can do that really well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's top tier. He punches really good.
He's basically One Punch Man.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. It's his defining character trait is being the champion of the people and defending others, and that's how you really challenge the character. With a moral quandary or with a problem he just can't punch. Yeah.
Or granted, yes, every once in a while, a problem that punches just as hard as he does. That is also a way to do it.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of one touch in Fire Emblem games I've always liked about it. Rescuing villages before the bandits get there. Because I always felt that kind of separated Fire Emblem from, say, StarCraft, where you just nuke everything.
Yeah, you're not. StarCraft largely takes places on places that have already been nuked or otherwise razed to the ground.
Yeah, like a Dragon Ball Z fight. It's no, let's go over here where there aren't any people, so we can just blow up a continent.
Yeah,
and I think that doing that kind of defines not only like the characters but your army pretty well, like what you're there to do. Through gameplay, I guess when you adapt something to a different game, you want to know does it capture like that aspect of it.
Yeah, so you want something that is going to be recognizable as the original. So it is it can be tricky finding the right genre. Some things like superheroes, a genre where you beat the crap out of a lot of guys makes a lot of immediate sense.
Like I'll paraphrase Yahtzee in regards to Spider-Man 2, the movie.
Yeah, the movie game.
He feels like other Spider games emphasize on combat, but this one, like all the effort was in the web slinging.
Yeah, and it's it's probably the best web slinging game out there because it's the first game you really feel like Spider-Man going around this city.
Yeah, you want combat, you go to like Final Fight or God of War, but if you want to swing around, you go to Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's why I feel like Spider-Man in things like Ultimate Alliance is kind of wasted.
Yeah,
where his Spider-Man's at his best when he can be his most acrobatic, but in something like Ultimate Alliance, there's not like a dodge button. There's not a lot of acrobatics. He's walking down the hall and punching things like the Thing or the Hulk would.
Yeah, same thing I feel about Superman being in a fighting game. It's
just not where the character belongs.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
No, go. So let's see. Have you said all you wanted to?
Yeah, basically.
All right, screw it. On the next one. So other kind of genre hopping, would like to see. And I basically typed that down, and I thought for like 15 minutes straight. I was like, I can only think of one. And this is going to sound really weird, and fans might jump down my throat about this, but I would like to see a Elder Scrolls like beat 'em up, starring like an interpretation of the protagonist of each game. Like some are more defined than others. Like in Morrowind, Skyrim, you would have like Dark Elf and Nord respectively. But I would be interested in seeing like what the team felt represented like Arena or Daggerfall or even Oblivion, which doesn't really center in on a specific like type of character.
Mm-hmm. So what in their minds? What did the hero of not Ferelden? That's a whole different thing. What did the hero in Oblivion do? What kind of character was he in the maker's minds?
Well, here's the thing. Oblivion, I would say, is like the less defined. Where in Skyrim, it's like big Nord hero.
Yeah, he's right on the box.
And Nerevarine, the prophecy kind of says like someone born in a specific way. Not doesn't necessarily mean dark elf, but I think a dark elf character would fit best.
Mm-hmm.
Even though when I played through the game, I didn't bother with that. But Oblivion Arena, and Daggerfall, I feel like you could basically go anywhere with that.
So I guess it would be a character that kind of embodies the theme of the game. So maybe Oblivion, that's more of a game about the story is about Septum. So maybe somebody you could go one of two ways. You can go somebody who would have been his subject, or someone who should have been like well opposed to him.
Well, I guess. I take it back. Oblivion's kind of fine. The first pick is an Imperial, and being in Cyrodiil, likely. But that place in the history of that universe is such like a mixed bag that it really could be anyone. Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe like a Paladin-esque character. But then again, I think of like Dissidia, what they did with Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah, it was the warrior, but he had aspects of the others in his gameplay.
You're right.
Where his magic was his items, but he was representing the game as a whole as much as he could. Although the art was of the fighter and knight character. Yeah. So they kind of did pick one, and I kind of wish they had gone with another one, maybe a red mage, because everybody was like a sword slinger in that game.
Yeah. Which
kind of shows that Final Fantasy does not have a whole ton of creativity as far as what its main characters use.
Yeah,
but so I kind of have two picks, and they're both two traditional RPGs. The first is Zelda, because as I mentioned before, I liked Hyrule Warriors in that it brought other characters in, but I would like to see maybe a Zelda game, maybe a small three character party thing with Link, Zelda, and like maybe Darunia or somebody as a tank. And I'd like to see Zelda take more of an active role as a magic type character. I would like to see. I would love to see Zelda more active in any of the games, and I feel like a party based RPG, maybe not even something turn based, but maybe something that plays like Xenoblade or Kingdom Hearts, something where it's more of an RPG, but something where you have a party of characters that are with you that contribute and participate in the story as opposed to just Link. And plus, if it's a Zelda game, someone else is going to have to do the talking.
Yeah, have Zelda, Link, and his interpreter. Yeah. Oh, he says hello.
Yeah, kind of like in Humans with Black Bolt and Medusa.
Yeah. Well, I just thought of something. Maybe, how in Prince of Persia, the prince and Farah are working together? Maybe something like that, only you can actually, like, command her to do, like, specific things.
Like a partner-based game almost.
Yeah, kind of like Eco, only again, more useful of a companion. Yeah. Just like, hey, there's a thing here I think you should shoot. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, something where you can just like, click a button, target that thing. And but I would love to see like a buddy cop game of Link and Zelda. And there's some DLC coming for Breath of the Wild. I hope Zelda takes a more active role in that. Because I just like, her name's been on the cover for so long, I want to see her other than like the very beginning and very end of the game.
Well, I guess for like a RPG, like, I guess my question is, how do you incorporate like the exploring and like all the gadgets that you have in gameplay that Zelda game typically has?
Well, it's possible to do it. I mean, Kingdom Hearts, you got a lot of moves that were just for exploration, like gliding and jumping, that didn't have anything to do with combat. I think, then again, Breath of the Wild doesn't have most of those. It has the glider thing. It doesn't have a hook shot. It doesn't have most of the traditional gadgets of Zelda. So I would be fine with a Zelda game that just did not have those.
Well, you did have like basically a tablet full of gadgets.
You did, but not necessarily. But
they're still there.
Yeah, they are still there, and I think you could do something similar to that and just kind of hand wave how the other characters are keeping up. Yeah. But I would like to see something in that vein in that world.
You know what I would do is have Zelda as the lead, but have like 3 or 4 other characters who aren't necessarily Link, but each have like some aspect, like one's more the bruiser, one's ranger. Have just like, instead of Link, just different characters.
I still want Link because it is still a Zelda game, and Link is still an important character in Zelda.
Yeah, but because I think you're kind of limiting yourself there. You're
maybe,
it's kind of chained to the franchise in that regard.
Well, it kind of is, because the lore of the franchise is about the hero. If Link is not in the game, there has to be something like, why is Link not in the game? And as we saw from Wind Waker, if Link is not in the game, bad things happen. Yeah,
but that makes a lot less flexible, as far as what you can do. Now,
it's still a Zelda game. I want I know it's not any more flexible, but I'm not talking about a anything goes game. I'm talking about a Zelda game, and the Zelda game has certain aspects to it that I want explored in that other franchise. I don't just want that other or that other genre. I don't just want that other genre, because there are other genre games. I want the aspects of the Zelda game in that other genre.
See, to my mind, you might as well just come up with another type of game. If you're going that far, like one game that I think does traditional RPG, but with Zelda puzzles pretty well, is Golden Sun, because You could use ice to attack your enemies, but you can also use it to make ice pillars either open doors or make a causeway somewhere. And it was its own thing, and I kind of feel that you do something, do that much of a change, you might as well just do another franchise.
Well, that's the thing I'm thinking of. I think taking Link out of the Zelda game is even more in that direction of you might as well do another franchise. See, because The Legend of Zelda is Zelda's story and Link's story. I think you need both to do it. So, but we mentioned Team Eco before, and this is kind of a weird one for me, where I would like a game like this, but at the same time I kind of don't want it. So my other genre-hopping wish list thing is a Team Eco RPG in the world of Eco and Shadow of the Colossus, because I really like those worlds, and I want to see the populated bits of them. But at the same time, one of the huge appeals of that franchise is the mystery of everything, and that everything is open to interpretation. So while I would love to see more of that world, I feel like seeing more of that world would take away the mystery and maybe be underwhelming. So that's my 2 cents on that. I don't really have anything else to add because there isn't a lot to the world that I can speculate on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could basically interpret what happened. Basically, Wander's descendants become like
they become the Horned Children.
They become the Horned Children, and Eco puts an end to it.
Yeah, but we don't know anything about the village Eco or even Wander came from, except they wear really weird masks. And we don't know enough about the outside world, which again is part of its charm. But I really want to know. But I really want to keep that charm.
Well, I'll paraphrase Extra Credits in this. Are we happier now that we know Darth Vader's backstory?
Yes and no. I think the backstory is good, but it could have been done better.
Yeah.
Specifically, I've heard of the what's it called? There is a version of the series or an order for the series that flows better as a story, and it's episode. It's the original movie. Okay, I'll do it in episodes 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and we can go over Star Wars maybe in a month when the new movie comes out, but that's the order you should watch it, and watch episode 1 maybe if you only have like really small children.
Right.
So
another character that they tried fleshing out but didn't work too well, Link.
When did they try to flesh out Link?
Well, when they decided to give him voice acting.
I said we're not talking about the CDI games.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the cartoon show.
The cartoon had its moments, and Link being voiced is not the big problem there.
Excuse me.
No, the problem there was it was a Saturday morning cartoon, and they made it as a typical Saturday morning cartoon. If you made a Zelda cartoon now, put it like maybe the guys who made Avatar: The Last Airbender, because they're just fantastic, I think then you'd be onto something.
Yeah.
And before we go, I mentioned we're going to talk about Smash Brothers because we kind of skipped it. It's kind of a special case in that, as Frank pointed out to me, almost none of the gameplay in it is related to the gameplay of any of the franchises, except
for the platformers.
Yeah, the platformers, which is Metroid to an extent. But I think it's probably an exception, or not an exception, but it's well received and doesn't have any grief from its fans because it's all of those franchises. It's not trying to be a Zelda game, so you can't say it's not a good Zelda game. It's not trying to be a Mario game or a Metroid game, so you can't say, oh, it does that wrong. It's basically a big fan service fight. And just another note, it's interesting that the game didn't start out in concept as a Super Mario or a Mario-based fighter. They had the gameplay, and they had a bunch of generics, and it was only, I think, Sakurai, Kirby's creator, that saw it and made the decision to put the Nintendo characters on it, basically just as a way to drum up sales, because he didn't think anybody was going to care about these random generic characters. He may or may not be right, but I think it was a good call.
Yeah. In fact, I think Captain Falcon's moves, every single one of them were from the generic characters, because there is absolutely no sense in him being in a fist fight.
Yeah, he's in a driving game. What is he punching anything for?
Yeah, and that game can give you the wrong impression of what the other games are like. like Fire Emblem, for instance, especially that one, since that's how we were introduced to the franchise.
Yeah, there is that, but it creates enough interest to get into the other franchises.
Yeah, and the lengths I could talk about Fire Emblem, but that's not this episode.
Yeah, we'll probably we'll get episodes about specific franchises and games at some point, maybe when we run out of the more broad stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and I will go over in heavy detail why Fates sucks.
Yeah, okay. We can do that later. But for now, I think we're going to sign off. This has been the C-Team. I'm Mike Curley.
And this is Frank Curley. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Just talk normally.
Hello.
Talk normally.
Hi. How you doing?
Just